6 months later, Kim Day stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Embassy of Human Sanguine Relations, watching ships from dozens of species dock at the expanded New Seoul station. What had started as a desperate attempt to survive, one night had evolved into something that changed the political landscape of known space. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. The first few weeks after the ritual of resonance had been chaos as news of the unprecedented alliance spread throughout the galaxy. Some species were horrified, others fascinated, and a few actively hostile to the idea of humans having powerful allies. But gradually, the benefits became undeniable. The Sanguine dynasty's endorsement had opened doors that humanity couldn't have budged in centuries of diplomatic effort. Trade routes that had been closed to primitive species suddenly welcomed human merchants. Research collaborations that had excluded Earth scientists now actively recruited them. Cultural exchanges flourished as other species grew curious about the upstart civilization that had somehow befriended the galaxy's most feared predators. "The weekly reports are quite encouraging," Queen Hannah observed, materializing beside him with the silent grace that still made Day jump occasionally. "Human settlements in the Outer Rim have reported a 70% decrease in pirate attacks since our families began patrolling those sectors." And the Centauri Science Collective formally invited Professor Kim from Seoul University to join their research into faster-than-light communications, Day added, checking his personal tablet. "She be the first human to work with their top-tier scientists," Queen Hannah nodded approvingly. "Your species' adaptability continues to astound us. In 6 months, you've established productive relationships with civilizations we've known for millennia. Your approach to problem-solving inspires creativity in others." Through the embassy's vast windows, they could see construction crews from a dozen species working together on the station's expansion. Human engineers collaborated with crystallite architects while Voidwalker artists designed spaces that could accommodate both physical and energy-based life forms. It was a level of cooperation that had seemed impossible just months earlier. "I got a message from my cousin Jun today," Day mentioned, smiling at the memory. "He's been assigned to design life support systems for a joint colony ship. Humans, Sanguines, and 3 other species all living together for a deep space exploration mission. A year ago, we couldn't get permission to survey dead systems. Now we're pioneering multi-species colonization. Your family should be proud," Queen Hannah said, and Day could hear genuine affection in her ancient voice. "Though I suspect they're still adjusting to having a cosmic diplomat for a relative." "My grandmother would have loved this," Day replied, touching the small wooden pendant he now wore, a piece of her chair, carved and polished into a symbol of the bridge between species. "She always said the best way to handle scary strangers was to invite them for dinner and listen to their stories." The communication array chimed with an incoming message from Earth's Galactic Relations Department. Another species wanted to establish formal diplomatic contact, specifically requesting human mediation in a complex territorial dispute. It was the 15th such request this month. "Ambassador Kim," the message began, his official title still felt surreal. "The hegemony of 9 worlds has formally requested your assistance in negotiating ... Duty calls," Queen Hannah observed with amusement. "Though I notice you've never asked me if you made the right choice that night." Day considered the question as he watched a group of human children playing with young Sanguines in the embassy's garden, a sight that would have been unthinkable before that drunken evening in Luna's bar. The vampire spawn were teaching the human kids to manipulate shadows into shapes while the humans showed them games that involved running and laughter. "I teased a vampire queen because I was drunk and stupid," he said finally. "But everything that came after, that was us choosing to be better than anyone expected, both species." "Indeed," Queen Hannah agreed. "Though I maintain that your initial stupidity was exactly the catalyst we needed. Sometimes the universe requires someone foolish enough to ignore the rules entirely." As Day prepared to respond to yet another diplomatic crisis that required the uniquely human combination of stubborn optimism and creative problem-solving, He couldn't help but smile. His grandmother had been right about scary strangers. Sometimes, the best way to handle them was to treat them like family until they decided to become it. The galaxy was a much more interesting place when humans stopped trying to fit in and started being themselves. And if that meant turning vampire queens into family friends and cosmic predators into diplomatic allies, well, that was just another day in the life of humanity's most unlikely ambassador. The story of Kim Dae would be told for generations across the galaxy, not as a tale of human bravery or alien mercy, but as proof that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the willingness to see potential where others see only problems, and that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected places. After all, as humans had proven time and again, there was no situation that couldn't be improved by the right combination of stubbornness, creativity, and really good hospitality. What happened next violated every known protocol for Sanguine Dynasty gatherings. Instead of the traditional Crimson ritual, where the host's life force would be collectively drained until only essence remained, Queen Hannah announced something that stunned even her own family. "We will perform the ritual of resonance," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "It has not been conducted in over a millennium." Prince Quan stepped forward, his expression hidden but his posture radiating confusion. "Sister Queen, the resonance ritual is reserved for equals, for beings whose existence enriches the universe rather than merely occupying space. This human is extraordinary," Queen Hannah finished, her gaze never leaving Dae's face. "Tell me, Kim Dae, do you know what makes your species truly unique among the thousands we have encountered?" Dae considered the question seriously. Around him, the most powerful predators in known space waited for his answer with genuine curiosity. "We're stubborn," he offered. A sound like distant thunder emanated from several family members. Laughter, Dae realized with amazement. "Close," Queen Hannah smiled, her fangs catching the holographic aurora light, "but incomplete. Your species possesses something. We have searched for across galaxies and through millennia the ability to see potential where others see only problems. You took an impossible situation and transformed it into ... She gestured at the transformed apartment, the cultural displays, the careful attention to making cosmic predators feel welcomed rather than feared. Princess Na had been examining the collection of human vampire stories with increasing fascination. These tales suggest that vampires, despite their power, often suffer from isolation and existential emptiness. Your authors understand that immortality without purpose becomes a curse rather than a gift. My grandmother used to say that every monster is just someone whose story we haven't heard yet, Dae replied. She said the scariest creatures are usually the loneliest ones. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a room full of ancient beings collectively reconsidering everything they thought they knew about mortality, purpose, and connection. Prince Quan moved to the violin he'd examined earlier and, with movements that suggested he'd mastered instruments before humans discovered fire, began to play. The melody that emerged was unlike anything in human musical history. It carried the weight of dying civilizations, the beauty of nebulae being born, and something else that made Dae's eyes water with emotions he couldn't name. The resonance ritual, Queen Hannah explained as her brother played, is performed when we encounter a being whose existence adds something meaningful to the universe. Instead of taking life force, we share it. The mortal gains enhanced longevity and perception. We gain ... perspective. What's the catch? Dae asked because his grandmother had also taught him that if something seemed too good to be true, it probably was. No catch, as you would understand it, Princess Na replied. But you would become something more than human while remaining essentially yourself. You would serve as a bridge between our species and yours, helping both understand each other better. The responsibility would be ... considerable. Dae looked around his transformed apartment. At these ancient beings who had somehow been charmed by human stubbornness and creativity, he thought about Commander Park's words about making humanity proud, about all the humans throughout known space who were dismissed as primitive newcomers by civilizations that measured time in geological epochs. "If I do this," he said slowly, What happens to my people? To humanity's place in the galactic community? Queen Hana's smile revealed not just fangs but genuine warmth. That Kim Dae would largely depend on you. But I suspect that any species capable of producing someone who would invite cosmic predators for dinner and somehow make them enjoy the experience might have more to offer the universe than anyone previously imagined. The ritual itself was surprisingly gentle. No dramatic ceremony, no cosmic Leijiao, just the Sanguine dynasty forming a circle around Dae and sharing something fundamental with him. He felt his perception expanding, his awareness growing beyond the confines of his apartment, his understanding deepening in ways that made him gasp with wonder rather than fear. When it was over, Dae was still human, but he was also something more. He could sense the life forces of everyone on the station, understand the emotional resonances of different species, and most importantly, he could feel the genuine respect and affection the Sanguine dynasty now held for humanity as a whole. The environmental sensors throughout New Sol Station recorded the exact moment the vampire family arrived. Temperature dropped 3 degrees across 7 sectors. Electromagnetic fields went crazy and every psychic species on the station reported. Feeling a presence that made empty space seem friendly, Dae watched through his apartment's security monitor as they came down the corridor. Queen Hana led the group wearing dark robes that seemed to eat light itself. Behind her came beings that looked like living shadows with faces. Their faces were hidden under hoods that seemed to contain tiny galaxies. The station's hallways emptied as they passed. Even the cleaning robots shut down rather than risk being noticed. The door chimed. Dae took what might be his final breath and opened it. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing exactly as he had practiced. "Welcome to my home." Queen Hana stepped inside, her ancient eyes immediately scanning the transformed space behind her. 5 other family members followed. Beings whose presence made reality seem negotiable. Dae caught glimpses of faces that held the beauty of dying stars and the terror of absolute darkness. "Interesting," Queen Hana said, quietly noticing the holographic expansions and careful lighting. "You have tried to make your home appear larger than it is. Most mortals who host us simply run to the biggest space they can find and hope distance might buy them time. Most mortals are not human." Dae replied, gesturing toward the seating area he had prepared. "We tend to work with what we have rather than wish for what we do not have." The Vampire Queen's siblings moved throughout the apartment, with fluid grace, their movements suggesting they could exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. One of them, introducing himself as Prince Quan, picked up one of the human cultural artifacts, a violin, and examined it with curiosity. "This creates vibrations for pleasure?" he asked, his voice carrying sounds that made the apartment's walls hum music. Dae confirmed. "Would you like to hear some? I have everything from classical pieces to the latest fusion music from the Centauri colonies." What happened next was perhaps the strangest cultural exchange in galactic history. The vampire family beings, who had existed since before most stars were born, found themselves experiencing human creativity for the first time. They listened to Mozart with the intensity of scientists discovering new laws of physics. They studied holographic reproductions of Go paintings like they were analyzing battle plans. They read passages from human vampire literature with expressions that shifted between amusement and something that looked like recognition. "Your species creates stories about creatures like us," observed Princess Na, whose ethereal beauty somehow became more pronounced by her obvious fascination. "But these vampires are not just predators. They struggle with conscience, with loneliness, with the burden of living forever. Humans have always been good at seeing the person inside the monster," Dae explained, serving the synthetic blood he had prepared. To his relief, the royal family accepted it graciously, though he suspected they were more interested in the gesture than the actual drink. And this, Queen Hana had discovered the centerpiece of Dae's preparation, his grandmother's wooden chair, now surrounded by a holographic display showing Earth's history. "That is where my grandmother used to tell me stories," Dae said simply. "Every human family has something like it, a place where we pass down our history, our values, our hopes for the future. I thought you might understand the concept." For the first time since their arrival, complete silence fell over the apartment. The vampire family exchanged looks that seemed to carry entire conversations. Finally, Queen Hana approached the chair and, to Dae's amazement, sat down carefully. "In 3,000 years, She said softly, "No mortal has ever offered me a seat at their family's heart prince." Quan had moved to the violin he had examined earlier, and with movements that suggested he had mastered instruments before humans. Discovered Fire began to play. The melody that emerged was unlike anything in human musical history. It carried the weight of dying civilizations, the beauty of stars being born, and something else that made Day's eyes water with emotions he could not name. That is when Day realized he might actually survive the night more than that he might be witnessing the beginning of something that had never happened before in galactic history. The most dangerous predators in known space were being charmed by human stubbornness and creativity, and they seemed to be enjoying it. The environmental sensors throughout New Sol Station registered the exact moment the Sanguine Dynasty arrived. Temperature dropped 3 degrees across 7 sectors, electromagnetic fields fluctuated wildly, and every empathic species on the station simultaneously reported feeling a presence that makes the void seem welcoming. Day watched through his apartment's security monitor as they approached. Queen Hannah led the procession, her dark robe seeming to absorb light itself. Behind her came beings that looked like living shadows given form, their faces hidden beneath hoods that seemed to contain small galaxies. The station's corridors emptied. As they passed, even the maintenance robots powering down rather than risk detection. The door chimed. Day took one final breath of what might be his last air and opened it. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing exactly as he'd practiced, "welcome to my home." Queen Hannah stepped inside, her ancient eyes immediately scanning the transformed space. Behind her, 5 other members of her family followed, beings whose presence made reality seem negotiable. Day caught glimpses of faces that held the beauty of dying stars and the terror of absolute darkness. "Interesting," Queen Hannah murmured, noting the holographic expansions and careful lighting. "You've attempted to make your dwelling appear larger than it is. Most mortals who host us simply flee to the largest available space and hope distance might buy them time." "Most mortals aren't human," Day replied, gesturing toward the seating area he'd prepared. "We tend to work with what we have rather than wish for what we don't." The Vampire Queen's siblings spread throughout the apartment with fluid grace, their movements suggesting they could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. One of them, introducing himself as Prince Quan, picked up one of the human cultural artifacts, a violin, and examined it with curiosity. "This produces vibrations for aesthetic pleasure?" he asked, his voice carrying harmonics that made the apartment's walls hum. "Music," Day confirmed. "Would you like to hear some? I have everything from classical compositions to the latest fusion pieces from the Centauri colonies." What followed was perhaps the strangest cultural exchange in galactic history. The Sanguine Dynasty, beings who had existed since before most stars were born, found themselves experiencing human creativity for the first time. They listened to Mozart with the intensity of scholars discovering new physics. They studied Van Gogh's holographic reproductions like tactical analyses. They read passages from human vampire literature with expressions that shifted between amusement and something resembling recognition. "Your species creates stories about creatures like us," observed Princess Na, her ethereal beauty somehow made more pronounced by her obvious fascination. "But these vampires are not mere predators. They struggle with conscience, with loneliness, with the burden of immortality. Humans have always been good at recognizing the person inside the monster," Day explained, serving the synthetic blood he'd prepared. To his relief, the royal family accepted it graciously, though he suspected they were more intrigued by the gesture than the sustenance. And this? Queen Hannah had discovered the centerpiece of Day's preparation, his grandmother's wooden chair, now surrounded by a holographic display showing Earth's history. "That's where my grandmother used to tell me stories," Day said simply. "Every human family has something like it. A place where we pass down our history, our values, our hopes for the future. I thought you might understand the concept." For the first time since their arrival, complete silence fell over the apartment. The Sanguine Dynasty exchanged glances that seemed to carry entire conversations. Finally, Queen Hannah approached the chair and, to Day's amazement, sat down carefully. "In 3,000 years," she said softly, no mortal has ever offered me a seat at their family's heart. That's when Day realized he might actually survive the night. More than that, he might be witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. With 36 hours left before the vampire family arrived, Day's apartment looked like something from a science fiction movie. His cousin Jun had somehow changed the station's power system to give enough energy for all the fancy lights holographic. Machines created the illusion of a space 3 times bigger than the real apartment, complete with a fake view of Earth aura dancing across walls that did not really exist. But the real genius of Day's plan was his understanding of what made humans different from other species in the galaxy. Other aliens approached problems with logic or tradition or overwhelming force. Humans approached problems with creativity that bordered on complete insanity. "Are you sure about this fake blood recipe?" asked. So, as she stirred a large container of red liquid that smelled like metal and flowers, "Because if this kills a vampire, Queen, they are going to make your death last for hundreds of years. It is not about the blood," Day explained as he adjusted the temperature controls for the 100th time. "It is about the story. Humans are the only species in the galaxy that turn everything into entertainment. We do not just eat, we create amazing food. We do not just fight, we create sports. We do not just survive, we create legends." His friend Min arrived with the final pieces, a collection of human cultural items, hastily gathered from every human ship and settlement within 3-star systems. Music from old Earth, holographic art displays, and something. Day was particularly proud of a collection of human stories about vampires throughout their history. "This is either brilliant or the stupidest thing anyone has ever tried," Min said as he watched Day program the environmental controls to create different atmospheric zones throughout the apartment, both Day admitted. But here is the thing about vampire legends in human culture. They are not just about monsters who drink blood, they are about beings caught between worlds, struggling with living forever, dealing with power and loneliness. They are sad figures, not just predators. As the final hours passed, Day made one last addition to his preparations. In the center of his transformed apartment, he placed a simple wooden chair from Earth, his most valuable possession inherited from his grandmother. It was humble, worn, and completely out of place among all the high-tech changes. But it represented something essential about humanity that Day hoped the vampire family would understand. The message screen lit up with an incoming call. Queen Hannah's face appeared, and her expression was impossible to read. "Kim Day, we arrive in 6 hours. I trust your preparations are good enough." "Your Majesty," Day replied with a bow that would have made his grandmother proud. "I promise you an experience unlike any your family has ever had. See that you do. My brothers and sisters grow hungry, and they have little patience for disappointment." As the call ended, Day looked around his transformed home. Everything was ready, except for the most important part, himself. He showered, put on his best clothes, a simple black suit that had belonged to his father, and sat down to wait for hours before the vampire family's arrival. Day got an unexpected visitor. Station Commander Park High, the highest-ranking human official in the sector, appeared at his door with security guards. "Son," she said, her weathered face serious with worry, "I have been watching this situation. We can get you out right now. No shame in running when facing impossible odds." Day smiled, and the expression surprised him because it felt genuine. "Commander, with respect, this is not about me anymore. This is about showing the galaxy that humans do not just survive. We adapt, we take the worst situations, and find ways to make them uniquely ours." Commander Park studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "In that case, the station's emergency rules have been suspended for tonight. Whatever happens in this apartment stays in this apartment. Good luck. Kim Day, make us proud." As she left, Day felt the weight of representing his entire species settling on his shoulders. He was not just trying to survive anymore, he was about to become the first human to voluntarily host a vampire family gathering. Whatever happened next would be recorded in both species' histories forever. The hours crawled by slowly. Day checked and rechecked everything. The synthetic blood was at the perfect temperature, the holographic displays were working properly, the cultural exhibits were arranged to tell the story of human civilization, the music playlist would take the vampires through centuries of human creativity, and in the center of it all sat his grandmother's chair, waiting to show these ancient beings what family meant to humans. Finally, the moment arrived. Day's door chimed with the sound that would either save his life or end it. He took one deep breath, straightened his father's suit, and walked to the door time to find out if human hospitality could charm the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. With 36 hours remaining, Day's apartment had been transformed into something that defied physics, good taste, and several interstellar safety regulations. His cousin Jun had somehow rerouted the station's power grid to provide enough energy for the elaborate lighting system Day had envisioned. Holographic projectors created the illusion of a space 3 times larger than the actual apartment, complete with a simulated view of Earth's aurora borealis dancing across false walls. But the real masterstroke was Day's understanding of what made humans unique in the galactic community. Other species approached problems with logic, tradition, or overwhelming force. Humans approached problems with creativity bordering on insanity. "You sure about this synthetic blood recipe?" asked Choi So, stirring a large vat of crimson liquid that smelled like iron and roses. "Because if this kills a vampire queen, they're going to make your death last centuries." "It's not about the blood," Day explained, adjusting the temperature controls for the 100th time. "It's about the story. Humans are the only species in the galaxy that turns everything into entertainment. We don't just eat, we create cuisine. We don't just fight, we create sports. We don't just survive, we create legends." His friend Park Min arrived with the final component, a collection of human cultural artifacts, hastily gathered from every human ship and settlement within 3 systems. Music from Earth's classical period, holographic art installations, and something Day was particularly proud of, a collection of human stories about vampires throughout their history. "This is either brilliant or the stupidest thing anyone has ever attempted," Min observed, watching Day program the environmental controls to create different atmospheric zones throughout the apartment. "Both," Day admitted. "But here's the thing about vampire legends in human culture. They're not just about monsters who drink blood. They're about beings caught between worlds, struggling with immortality, dealing with power and loneliness. They're tragic figures, not just predators." As the final hours ticked away, Day made one last addition to his preparations. In the center of his transformed apartment, he placed a simple wooden chair from Earth, his most prized possession inherited from his grandmother. It was humble, worn, and completely out of place among all the high-tech modifications. But it represented something essential about humanity that Day hoped the Sanguine dynasty would recognize. The message console chimed with an incoming transmission. Queen Hannah's face appeared, her expression unreadable. "Kim Day, we arrive in 6 hours. I trust your preparations are adequate?" "Your Majesty," Day replied with a bow that would have made his grandmother proud. "I promise you an experience unlike any your family has ever encountered." "See that you do. My siblings grow hungry and they have little patience for disappointment." As the transmission ended, Day looked around his transformed home. Everything was ready except for the most important element, himself. He showered, put on his best clothes, a simple black suit that had belonged to his father, and sat down to wait. 4 hours before the Sanguine dynasty's arrival, Day received an unexpected visitor. Station Commander Park High, the highest-ranking human official in the sector, appeared at his door with a security detail. "Son?" she said, her weathered face grave with concern. "I've been monitoring the situation. We can extract you right now. No shame in retreat when facing impossible odds." Day smiled, the expression surprising him with its genuineness. "Commander, with respect, this isn't about me anymore. This is about showing the galaxy that humans don't just survive, we adapt. We take the worst situations and find ways to make them uniquely ours." Commander Park studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "In that case, the station's emergency protocols have been suspended for the evening. Whatever happens in this apartment stays in this apartment. Good luck, Kim Day. Make us proud." As she left, Day felt the weight of representation settling on his shoulders. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was about to become the first human to voluntarily host a Sanguine dynasty gathering. Whatever happened next would be recorded in both species' histories forever. Day woke up in his tiny apartment with his head feeling like someone had hit it with a space hammer. His mouth tasted like engine fuel, and his eyes hurt from the bright lights. For just one happy moment, he thought maybe last night had been a bad dream. Then he saw his message screen blinking with 17 urgent messages, and he knew his life was over. The first message was from his friend Park Jin, who worked as a trader in the outer space routes. Day, please tell me the space news about you fighting a vampire queen is not real, please, because if it is real, you need to run to the Federation embassy right now and ask for help. The second message was from his business partner Veltar, who was from the Centauri system human friend Day. Your life is now very short. The Shadow Queen's family eats entire worlds. My people will hide you if you run away now. By the time Day read the 7th message, he was starting to understand how much trouble he was in. By the 17th message, could not breathe properly and his hands were shaking. All the messages said the same scary things. The Sanguine dynasty was not just any vampire family. They were ancient beings who had lived for thousands of years. They did not just drink blood. Like the vampires in old Earth stories, these vampires ate the life force of entire star systems. Queen Hannah herself was over 2,000 years old and had personally destroyed 17 different planets. The Crimson Gathering was their most important ceremony, where the whole family would drain a person until nothing was left but dust. Think he said to himself as he walked back and forth in his small apartment. The place was barely big enough for one person, let alone a family of space vampires. He had 47 hours to somehow make his terrible apartment into something that would not anger beings who thought planets were snacks. His first idea was to run away, pack his things, steal a small ship, and disappear into unknown space, where even the vampire family could not find him. But as he started throwing his clothes into a bag, something made him stop. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stupidity, but Day started thinking about how other aliens saw humans. Humans were the new kids in space, the primitive ones that most advanced civilizations barely noticed. They were too violent for the peaceful traders, too rough for the artistic groups, and too short-lived for the ancient empires to care about. But there was one thing humans had that other species did not have: the stubborn refusal to give up when things seemed impossible. You know what Day said to his face in the bathroom mirror? If I'm going to die, I am going to die doing something that people will remember. He turned on his communication system and started calling people. First, he called his cousin, Lee Jun, who worked on the station's air and power systems. Then he called his ex-girlfriend Choi, who managed one of the station's fancy restaurants. Then he called every human he knew in this part of space. I need help, he told each of them. Big help. And I cannot tell you why, but if this works, every human in known space will benefit from it. The first person to arrive was Jun, who brought tools and equipment that Day did not even know existed. I cannot believe you are doing this, Jun said as he started working on the apartment's power system. The whole station is talking about the crazy human who invited death to dinner, then arrived with containers of food and drinks from her restaurant, along with decorative items that made the apartment look bigger and more impressive. Are you completely insane? She asked, but she was smiling as she worked. This is either the stupidest thing anyone has ever done or the most brilliant. More humans started arriving throughout the day. Some brought holographic equipment that could make the small apartment look like a palace. Others brought cultural items from Earth: music instruments, art pieces, books that told stories of human history. Everyone worked without asking too many questions, because they understood that sometimes you had to help family even when family was being incredibly stupid. By hour 6 of his 47-hour deadline, Day had put together what could barely be called a plan. It was crazy, potentially deadly, and absolutely guaranteed to either kill him or make him famous throughout the galaxy. But it was also the most human thing he could think of doing. As he looked around his apartment, which was now filled with borrowed equipment, amazing food, and enough lights to power a small moon, Day allowed himself to smile a little. Queen Hannah wanted to see what human hospitality looked like. She was about to get the complete experience. The apartment now had multiple rooms created by holographic walls. Each room was set to a different temperature and atmosphere to make different types of beings comfortable. There was earth music playing softly in the background and displays showing human art and culture. The centerpiece was his grandmother's old wooden chair, the only thing he had left from Earth, surrounded by pictures and stories of human families. Jun finished the power work and wiped sweat from his face. This should Handle whatever energy they need, he said. But Day, are you sure about this? The whole galaxy knows what happens to people who host sanguine gatherings. They do not survive, so finished arranging the food, which included synthetic blood that smelled real enough to fool anyone. The recipe is perfect, she said. But if this kills a vampire queen, they will make your death last for centuries. Other humans kept arriving, bringing more equipment, more food, more decorations. By the end of the day, Day's tiny apartment had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a palace. The holographic walls made it seem 3 times bigger. The lighting created a warm, welcoming atmosphere, and everywhere there were signs of human culture and creativity. This is incredible, said Min, another human trader who had brought art pieces from Earth colonies. You have turned a death sentence into a dinner party. Day looked at all his friends working to help him survive what should have been impossible. He realized that this was what made humans special in the galaxy. When one of them was in trouble, the others came running. They did not just help, they improved. They took bad situations and found ways to make them better. Queen Hannah wanted to see human traditions. She was going to get the full treatment. Kim Day was having the worst week of his life when he walked into Luna's bar on Station Omega 7. The lights were dim and the place smelled like engine oil mixed with alien sweat. Every kind of creature you could imagine was drinking their silicon. Creatures that looked like walking rocks, gas beings that floated like colored clouds, 6 armed traders from the outer systems. All kinds of weird stuff that made Day feel homesick for Earth. Day just wanted to forget his problems. His cargo ship had been attacked by space pirates near the Andromeda Gate. They took everything he owned and now he was broke. His boss was angry. His girlfriend back on Earth had stopped returning his calls. His whole life was falling apart, and all he wanted was to drink until he could not think anymore. The bar was packed with aliens, but there was one empty stool at the far end. Next to it sat the most beautiful woman Day had ever seen. She had skin so pale it almost glowed. Her hair was black as space itself and hung down her back like liquid shadow. Her eyes were deep and dark, like looking into a black hole. She wore a long red dress that seemed to move on its own even when she sat still. She was drinking something that looked like red wine, but when Day got closer, he could smell metal in the air, like when you cut yourself and taste blood. Every alien in the bar was staying far away from her. Some were actually shaking when they looked at her. The 4-armed bartender kept wiping the same glass over and over while staring at her with fear in all 4 of his eyes. Day had been drinking since noon, and the alcohol made him feel brave. So he walked right up and sat down next to her. The woman turned to look at him, and for just a second Day felt like he was falling into empty space. Her eyes were so old and deep that they made him dizzy. Hello there, he said with a big smile. You look lonely over here. Mind if I join? Youth woman stared at him for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that was soft but somehow made his bones feel cold. Do you know what I'm? Little human Day laughed and waved his hand. A beautiful woman who needs better company than all these scared aliens, he said. The translator chip in his head was picking up whispers in different languages, but he was too drunk to care. All around them, creatures were backing away and some were actually running for the door. The woman smiled, and Day saw that her teeth were not normal. They were sharp, like knives, sharp enough to cut through metal. Her smile got wider as she watched his face. I am Queen Hannah of the Sanguine Dynasty, she said. My family has ruled the shadow sectors for 3,000 years. We are what your people call vampires, though we are much more than your simple stories described. Dave burst out laughing so loud that the whole bar went quiet. Sure you are, he said, and I am the king of the galaxy. Look, your majesty, how about I buy you a real drink instead of whatever fake blood you are sipping there? The temperature in the bar dropped fast. Day could see his breath in the air. Every conversation stopped, even the music from the speakers cut out. The 4-armed bartender dropped his glass and it shattered on the floor. Queen Hannah's smile got even wider, showing more of those knife-sharp teeth. You mock me, she said. Her voice now had strange sounds in it that made Day's teeth hurt. You, a simple cargo runner from a nothing planet, dare to make fun of the Queen of Shadows? Hey, we all put our pants on the same way, Day said, still too drunk to understand the danger. Royal or not, you are still sitting here alone on a Friday night, just like the rest of us losers. Something changed in Queen Hannah's face. The cold anger melted away and became something like curiosity. How interesting, she said. Your species really is as strange as our reports said. Very well, brave human. Since you find my nature so funny, perhaps you would like to see more of our traditions up close. She stood up and moved like flowing water. I invoke the right of mortal curiosity, she announced in a voice that filled the whole bar. You have 3 days to prepare your home for my family's crimson gathering. If you fail to show proper respect, your blood will feed our children for the next 100 years. Wait, what? Day said. His drunk brain was trying to understand what just happened, but Queen Hannah was already walking toward the door. Her coat moved behind her like wings. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back. Owen Kim. Day of the ship. Lucky strike. Your registration shows you live in Sector 7 apartment 3B on New Seoul Station. We will arrive this weekend. Try not to disappoint us. She walked out and the bar stayed quiet for a full minute. Then everyone started breathing again and talking at once. The bartender came over today with shaking hands and poured him another drink. This one is free, he said in a voice like a whisper. Think of it as your last meal. Day sat there staring at the door where the woman had gone. He was starting to sober up and realize that something very bad had just happened around him. The other aliens were packing up and leaving fast. Some were making what sounded like prayers in their own languages. Others were just running. What did I just do? Day asked himself out loud. The bartender leaned closer. Friend, he whispered, you just invited the most dangerous family in the galaxy to dinner, and they said yes. Day finished his drink in one gulp. Then he had another and another, but no matter how much he drank, he could not stop thinking about those ancient eyes and those knife-sharp teeth. Most of all, he could not stop thinking about the way Queen Hannah had smiled when she accepted his challenge. It was the smile of something that had lived for thousands of years and had never met anything it could not kill. By the time Day stumbled back to his apartment, the news was already spreading through the station. Human challenges Vampire Queen cargo runner invites Sanguine Dynasty for dinner. Man signs his own death warrant. The stories got wilder with each telling, but they all agreed on one thing. Day was going to die this weekend, and it was going to be very, very painful.